Palestine, free Palestine, free Palestine, free.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be with you all today. And I don't want to make anyone jealous, but I was just speaking on a platform with Loki just a couple of hours ago. So it's great to see that his music is inspiring you over there as well. I wanted to start just talking a little bit about the Stop the War Coalition. For people who might not know much about it, it was founded in 2001 in response to the war on terror. So it was shortly after the 9/11 attacks and with the statement made by President George Bush at the time about the war on terror. There was, a mass meeting of people here in London, and there was the agreement to set up a campaign, knowing that a war by the United States and with the support and participation of Britain in Afghanistan was part of a imperialist project in the Middle East and would result in the mass killings of people in Afghanistan and Iraq. And at the time, there were plans to carry out wars in other countries as well. And so the Stop the War Coalition was founded with a principal aim of opposing that war on terror and opposing the wars within it, as well as also recognizing that these wars would necessarily lead to the dehumanization of Muslim and Arab peoples, which would result in Islamophobia back here in the UK, which is exactly what happened. And also that the justification for these wars and the need for the states to push through these wars and try and silence dissent would mean the clamping down of our civil liberties. And we saw, for example, in the early 2000s, massively increased police powers against protesting, the setting up of what later became legal, the Prevent Agenda, which was basically state racial profiling of Muslim people across institutions and in public life. And so that was the kind of core of what Stop the War was set up to do. It mobilized against the Afghanistan war, which obviously began very quickly in 2001, and so there wasn't kind of much time to try and mobilize the forces to stop it, but continued to oppose it even as it carried on and made the arguments about the other wars that our government was planning to carry out. And from early 2002, it became very obvious that Iraq was next in line. And also in 2002, Israel launched a major offensive against the Palestinian people in the West Bank, particularly on the Jenin refugee camp, and using the exact rhetoric around the war on terror, labeling Palestinians and terrorists and labeling their attack on the Palestinians as part of this global war against terrorism. And so Stop the War made it a point to integrate Palestine solidarity within the coalition's aims. And on February the 15th, 2003, which was a global day of protest against the Iraq war, here in Britain, we had the biggest demonstration in British political history. It's estimated it's between 1 and 2 million people on the streets of London. And on that front banner of the demonstration, it read, "Don't attack Iraq, freedom for Palestine." And I think that was a very significant moment because I think it laid the basis for incorporating Palestine solidarity within the anti-war movement, within the peace movement, and set the stage, I think, for what has become the Palestine solidarity movement that we have today. And I wanted to explain a little bit about how the Stop the War Coalition works and this kind of model of a united front, which is essentially an attempt at bringing people together from different political traditions, broadly on the left, to mobilize and organize against one issue that we can all agree on. So in the Stop the War Coalition, you have revolutionary socialists and Marxists. You have the kind of Labour Party left. You at the time had the Green Party. You had the Muslim community. You had trade unions, and so on. And people who have different ideas about how change can come about. In the grand scheme of things, reform versus revolution, or even on kind of how we define imperialism exactly, sometimes even on strategy and tactics, but generally agreeing that our country is participating in these wars, our country is propagating these wars, XYZ ramifications have come out of it, and that we need to build the broadest movement that we can to challenge those things. Um, and particularly with our country playing such a significant role as the kind of lead junior partner in US imperialism, it was really important that we had this broad coalition, and it's meant that the anti-war movement at the time, I mean, at its peak between 2003 and sort of 2006, was able to organize in every locality across the country. I mean, in some areas of London, they were stop the war branches by road. So it was kind of, it really spread wide. Um, and I think fundamentally the coalition is not party political. So, we're not interested in electoralism in that kind of sense. We had people who were within the Labour Party who were part of the coalition. We had people in the Green Party who were part of the coalition. And for example, more recently, when Jeremy Corbyn was the leader of the Labour Party, um, as a coalition, we were able to support him as an anti-war candidate, as someone who would speak on our demonstrations and support our anti-war principles, but without getting into kind of our campaign is about voting for this one party or anything like that. Um, Here in the UK, we also have the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, which is its own united front of socialists and Palestinians and other groups within it. And it is the leading organization on the question of Palestine. So Stop the War has a kind of wider remit, against war and against imperialism, of which Palestine is a very important part. Whereas the Palestine Solidarity Campaign is very specifically about Palestine and has its own kind of model on how it works. And then the movement at the moment is a sort of united front of united fronts. So we have kind of six main organizations that are part of a coalition, which includes the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, Stop the War, the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, because we know Israel has nuclear weapons, the Muslim Association of Britain, which is one of the biggest Muslim organizations in the UK, the Palestine Forum for Britain, which is a Palestinian organization, and the Friends of Al-Aqsa, which is also a Muslim and Palestine focused organization. And I think this model has proved very effective because it is broad, it represents a wide layer of people just in and of itself, and it allows us to reach into and have roots in working class communities across the country and in the institutions that represent them, so like trade unions, for example. In this current period since October 7th, I mean, we were faced initially with an absolute onslaught in the immediate aftermath of Hamas's actions, with kind of wall-to-wall coverage of what happened, with our entire political class, with almost no exception, attacking the Palestinian people, saying all kinds of racist things about them, and attacking. And because Israel had already begun its attack on the Palestinians kind of immediately justifying those attacks and attacking anyone who was trying to oppose the killing of the Palestinian people. And we were starting from a position where for the last few years, since Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party, our movement had faced sustained attack with attempts to smear us and any solidarity with Palestine, equating any solidarity with Palestine with anti-Semitism. And to some degree, that had been successful. It had been successful in tarnishing Jeremy Corbyn's reputation and ultimately causing some of the divisions in the party that led to the kind of end of the Corbyn project. So that was the kind of position that we were starting from. And when we called the first kind of national demonstration the week after that attack, we had zero Labour MPs willing to support the demonstration, willing to speak on the demonstration. We had zero Labour Party branches that either wanted to or were allowed to by the Starmer leadership to support the demonstration and tell their members to come on it or to bring their banners on it. We had zero trade union general secretaries who agreed to speak on the demonstration or to put the message out to their memberships about it. But I think because of our sustained campaigning over the last 20 years, because we've been able to maintain this coalition and so on, we were still able to, from the grassroots, from the rank and file, mobilize 150,000 people on that first demonstration. And I think that was a pivotal moment at that time. And there was some hesitation, I should add, within the coalition about whether it was too soon, given the focus was still on what had happened in Israel and how the media was presenting it and so on. And maybe we should wait a bit. But that demonstration proved pivotal in breaking through that kind of media consensus that there was and in giving confidence to hundreds of thousands and millions of people who were, horrified by what was being done to the Palestinian people, but had maybe been scared to speak out. And so on the second demonstration we had the following week, we had 300,000 people. Um, the third demonstration, which the government then tried to ban, and we went ahead and did anyway, we had 800,000 to 1 million people on the streets of London. And in between those demonstrations, we have had protests in basically every town and city around the United Kingdom, and all sorts of other actions. Um, and I think what our movement has achieved already is, so in case people missed it, so the Home Secretary of the country tried to ban our march outright, called us hate marches, said we were anti-Semitic, and that we were marching on Armistice Day, which ironically is a day for a ceasefire, and we were calling for a ceasefire, but nonetheless tried to ban us from doing so. We said we would march regardless, and that put the police in a position where they didn't ban us. And as a result, the Home Secretary was sacked. So that was something that we achieved, and it was a disgraceful moment for the Prime Minister himself, who had backed her, and it caused a massive division within the Labour Party. And we saw when there was a vote in Parliament shortly after, um, about calling a ceasefire, Keir Starmer faced the biggest rebellion to his leadership to date as a result. So I just to go back to the question of the United Front, which I think was key, and um, yeah, sorry. And in terms of the kind of tactics of the movement, I mean, early on, and this is something that we've had discussions about for years, but particularly at the moment, and because of the scale of things, and because of how horrified people are, and because we were starting from such a low point of mobilization and from having been under attack for so long, there were debates which tried to kind of counterpose the idea of mass protests and of mobilizing people on the streets versus direct action, occupying arms factories and train stations and the rest of it. Um, and I think the argument that we had and which we won within the movement was that these things are actually not in opposition to each other. We need both of these things. We need a range of tactics. We need the mass mobilizations and we need the direct action. And actually, like I was saying, had we not had that first big demonstration which broke through the wall-to-wall attacks that we were facing, then the direct actions that have followed, the occupations of the train stations, the pickets of the arms factories, and all kinds of other things, would have been much smaller, would have been much weaker, would have been under much more attack by the state and by the police. And so it's that process of galvanizing people in a big way and showing our majority and demonstrating our strength, um, that allows for other actions to take place. And those actions then help feed back into the mobilizations and so on. And it's a kind of symbiotic relationship, that has to be maintained in that way. And particularly, the criticisms that A to B marches don't work and so on. I mean, we have proved that our A to B march, when we were facing a ban, literally broke the government. So, I think those arguments have to be taken head on. And I think, speaking from a personal perspective, the first demonstration I ever went to was a Palestine demonstration 15 years ago when Gaza was being bombed in 2008 and 9. And it was that demonstration which, as a 16-year-old, showed me just how many people there are who agree with me, and how many people there are who care about this, and how many people there are who are willing to fight about this. And it was the speeches that I heard on that demonstration, and the literature I was given on that demonstration, and the chants I heard, which shaped my politics till today. Um, so yeah, so just in a kind of slight defense of demonstrations, I think they are a point which demonstrate our strength and unity and help to build our politics within the movement as well. And so as a result of our demonstrations, like I said, we've caused a massive political crisis for the government. We have challenged the police, who for the last few years, the government has been expanding their powers, constantly, and they have been directing, particularly at the climate movement, with Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion, these new powers that they have under the Public Order Act, and which they tried to use against us, but literally couldn't because of how many of us there were. And so we've kind of confronted that in a very serious way. We've caused this massive division within the Labour Party, which, Starmer's been able to be absolutely ruthless against the left since he became leader of the Labour Party, and now he's kind of on the back foot. And as a result of not just the mobilizations we've had in the last few weeks, but that sustained campaigning for so long, we are in a position where we know from recent polls that 76% of the British public support a ceasefire, that there's a very good chance that a majority of the British public share solidarity with the Palestinian people. And given that our entire political establishment doesn't, there is this clear sense that people have that they're not being represented by the political class. And I think that is important in terms of taking our movement forward and taking all movements on all kinds of issues forward. And I'll also say that one of the things that we've done is that we've had these big national demonstrations in London, and then in between, we've had kind of local days of action, which have, still had thousands of people, but in their own cities and in their own towns and areas of London and so on. And I think that relationship has allowed us to simultaneously mobilize people in a big way and demonstrate our power, and then take that back into the localities, into the communities, and build those roots locally, and build the activists on the ground in the areas who are going to be out leafleting, who are going to be out organizing public meetings, challenging local MPs, and so on and so forth. And so I think been a kind of useful model. And I just the last thing I want to talk about is the role of socialists within this movement. And I think going back to the foundation of Stop the War 20 years ago, 22 years ago, socialists were instrumental in making the case for the United Front, in uh, building that unity amongst the left and the Muslim community and pacifists and people from different political traditions, and driving that forward. And I think that's still the case today. I think socialists have played. I mean, like my organization that I'm involved in, Counterfire, is one of the leading organizations within the Stop the War coalition, and I think we've played a particular role in building that united front, in maintaining that united front, and in giving direction. And so we had, like I was saying at the beginning, there was hesitation about whether we should have protests or just vigils, or wait for a little while. And it was socialists who made the argument that no, we should mobilize. Now is the time to mobilize. We should do it. When the government initially said protests shouldn't be taking place on Armistice Day, there was some hesitation, within the movement about actually maybe we should call it off and wait for a week. And it was us who said, actually, no, this is exactly the time we should be protesting. When the Home Secretary then said that the march could be banned, some people were like, okay, if it gets banned, then we won't protest. And we said, actually, no, we will defy that ban. And we, said we will march and put that out on Twitter, and it got, shared a lot, and so on. Um, and through it all, also we've stressed on this tactic of mass mobilization as a means of building all the component parts of the movement, and in trying to incorporate the Labour left and Labour left MPs where we can, and the trade unions as much as possible. So we've moved from a situation where on that first demonstration, we had no trade union general secretary supporting, and we had half of the unions in the country, or the big unions in the country, putting out statements which were extremely weak at best, to now every single union reaffirming their solidarity with the Palestinian people and immediately demanding a ceasefire, and most unions having their general secretaries or senior leadership speaking at demonstrations and putting out emails to all their branches around the country about coming, providing funding for coaches from different parts of the country to get down to the demonstration and so on. And I think that's been really important. And I think there's still a lot of work to be done, but I think socialists have been instrumental in making that connection and fighting for that link with the trade unions and as much trade union participation as we can have. And just the last thing I would say in terms of the role of socialists is that through this all, the priority has been building the biggest and broadest and widest movement, but we have also maintained our own separate and distinct socialist organization that puts forward the arguments, just like I'm making now about building that united front in the first place, but also which has that specific analysis about what British imperialism looks like, or imperialism in general looks like, why it's an extension of capitalism, why it has to be, our movements have to resist it and have to be connected with the other movements that are challenging the state and so on. And I think that's been really important. And so we've made sure that on the demonstrations we have a specifically socialist presence as well, with our leaflets and our newspapers and the other things that we have, to directly try and politicize and build that current within the movement. Because I think the way we're going, this is not going to end anytime soon, I don't think. And I think there is a massive layer of people who've been politicized by this movement, but and I think Palestine, by the way, in particular, has the ability to very quickly politicize people in a way that helps them understand imperialism and capitalism more generally, and collective action and so on. But it's not automatic, and I think socialists have to play that role of connecting those dots, and helping people to understand the importance of the movement and why it needs to be directed as best and as effectively as it possibly can. And I'll end it there. Thank you.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free